That's the difference between you and me. You talk about it, I do it.
Sit down, Mark.
Let me talk to you. Acknowledge me.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. Come on in, sit down, because it's time for another DB's Territory Treasures. Of course, I am DB, the Dirty Bird. Welcome, man. Appreciate you guys coming in, downloading, listening, subscribing, all that good stuff. As I said, I am DB. I am the host of the Sit Down Marks podcast, and this podcast is a part of the Sit Down Marks family of networks, whatever you want to call it, that kind of stuff. So I want to thank everybody for listening and subscribing, downloading on all those podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. And by the way, happy April Fool's Day. As you know, April Fool's Day is a little bit different around here. It's also my birthday. So, if you see me around or, shoot an old man a post on social media, something saying happy birthday, but another trip around the sun, I guess, as they say. But I want to let you guys know the latest Sit Down Marks podcast is available right now, where we're discussing the best heels in wrestling right now. Click it, check it out, and be on the lookout for our WrestleMania pre and post podcast coming up here. So today, man, I'm excited because today we're going to complete a 2-part series discussing the man they call Sting. If we just part 1 is available now. We dropped a couple months ago where I brought Dylan in from the Sit Down Mars podcast, and he's going to be joining us again later on this podcast, just like he did. We talked about Surfer Sting, everything that how came with Surfer Sting, why he was so cool, the best matches to check out, all that kind of stuff. So today, man, part 2, and it's going to be fun, man. Today, because we're going to discuss the second. I mean, he had other iterations, but, the second most popular iteration of Sting, and that's going to be Crow Sting. Thank you guys so much for listening, man. I really do appreciate it, man. So if you guys are ready, let's do this.
It's Sting!
All right, let's talk about Crow Sting, man. So let's talk about what made Crow Sting cool. What made him cool to us fans? Was it the makeup? Was it the black bats? The hair? The long black trench coat? The silent killer sent to destroy the NWO? Was it the rappelling to the ring from the rafters? When he would do that, hanging out in the rafters, what's the answer to all of this? Well, my friends, the answer is all of it. All of it's the reason why we love Crow Sting, man. Just the coolness, the darkness, the kind of outsider, kind of thing that he was portraying, if you will. I probably should use a different word than the outsider. That word's associated, with Hall and Nash, but I mean, that was it, man. He had a cool factor on top of cool factors, man. So so really, really cool time and era too, when he debuted. So let's talk about the face paint. So, let's rewind a bit, right? So where did the crow part of Crow Sting come from? Well, I'm an old man, so, let's talk about, my favorite era. Let's talk about the 90s, right? 1994, there was a movie released called The Crow. The main character, his name was Eric Draven in the movie. Now, he was played by Bruce Lee's son, his name was Brandon Lee. He was this character who was in a rock band that basically was killed, rose from the dead to get vengeance on this gang that had killed his fiance. And the movie is about the story of him, getting revenge, leading up to the final boss, at the end, that kind of stuff. Great movie. I really love it. It's very 90s movie to me. The face paint Crow Sting used was very similar to this character's face paint in the movie. Hence, Crow Sting was born. The vengeance of Eric Draven in this movie was very relatable to the story Sting was involved in versus the NWO. So What was the promotion? WCW. Let's talk about his debut date. October 21st, 1996. Let's talk about how it all happened. So the summer of 1996, NWO was running everything. The NWO shirts were all over the place. And Sting debuts, right, to drop a Scorpion death drop, a fake Sting, to kind of make his debut. They had this fake Sting that they'd been kind of like beating up and, doing things to try to antagonize the real Sting. And here he is. He shows up, right? And he shows up and DiBiase invites Sting, as does Kevin Nash, to join the NWO. The famous words from Sting, towards the end of the debut was, the only thing that is for sure is that nothing is for sure. Let's hear some audio from his debut.
That's Sting. This is. Wait a minute. Wait till the bogus Sting season. Wait a minute. Here we go. Wait a minute. What's with NWO? They're just standing by watching this. Wait a minute.
Eric, Sting is wearing black and white, the colors of the NWO.
All right, so you hear Bobby Heenan say, he's wearing the colors of the NWO, right? So we're automatically like, oh man, here comes another NWO member, not our boy Sting, right? Like, but the last thing you heard me say, the only thing that is for sure is that nothing is for sure, is what Sting said. Well, that was the last time Sting would basically, talk for about a year. So after Halloween Havoc 1996, he was seen perched in the rafters for the first time. Now, late 96, the question was, whose side is he on? Is he WCW? Is he NWO? Often doing things and tactics to make us question what side he was on. What choices, why is he making these choices? Often doing things to make us think, man, he is NWO. Then doing things to make us think, well, he just might be, WCW. So, early 1997, as it was, the famous uncensored pay-per-views, right? He chose WCW, and the war was on, and he began going after Hall, Nash, and Hogan. And so after descending from the rafters and, the Sting era began, right? The Crow Sting era began. And we all went out and bought these Scorpion T-shirts, right? Which ended up being the second best-selling shirt of 1997. Now, a little trivia for you. Do you guys remember what the number one shirt was selling back in 1997? How about Austin 316, huh? Yeah, I know we all at least had one of those shirts. I had one of those. I had a NWO. I had a Crow Sting, like all across the board, right? New guys and bad guys. But, Crow Sting basically created as, he was a counterpart to the NWO, And this all culminated basically in 1997 at Starrcade when he took on Hulk Hogan. We were looking at a year's worth of storylines, fake Stings, mannequins, fake people, falling from the rafters. But finally, the wrong of NWO had been righted, and we all celebrated. But we didn't celebrate about this match. This match sucked. It wasn't any good. It's kind of infamous for being bad, but the night that the WCW won. But I'll always remember Sting celebrating with Lex during this time because, like Sting and Lex, they were kind of like the WCW flag bearers, during that time. So to see them win, the elation, the shit that they went through as friends, you know what I mean? In this, like, Lex often questioned what Sting was doing, you know what I mean? Like, what's actually going on here? You know what I mean? But yeah, I always remember that, man, Sting and Lex, celebrating. But the story was Sting versus NWO, great at times, bad at times, but our hero, our dark hero, he prevailed, and that's what we wanted, right? Because, the WCW version of Crow Sting is, to me, probably the most popular, for that era. Now, some newer fans would probably say, his WWE run or his AEW run. So let's talk about those real quick. So moved to WWE in 2014, but he wasn't as revered and celebrated there as he was in WCW. Way more popular in WCW and AEW than he was in WWE. A lot of us, when we look back and we think on, Sting's run in WWE, we get pissed off because he had this match at Mania 31. It was Sting's only WrestleMania match, and he lost to Triple H, and we all know he should have won. They know he should have won, but, this was still in the Vince McMahon era, this was, perceived as the proverbial final nail in the WCW coffin. This was when the final nail was put in, when Triple H beat Sting, WWE versus WCW, the final, the final conflict, if you will. So hence why we got that result of the match. But man, I was very happy because Sting got a proper run to end his career in AEW, finishing off in 2024. And one of his sons is currently training in the AEW Dark Match, Ring of Honor banner, and that kind of stuff. So it's going to be really cool when we finally see him, make his way up into the main card, so to speak. So, all right, everyone, to highlight a few of Crow Sting's best matches, let's bring in the resident green hat guy from the Sit Down Marks podcast, the front row sitter himself, back for part number 2. Dylan, thank you for joining me today, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me back. Let me be the first to say happy birthday, DB.
Whoop, whoop.
Don't look a day older at all. Believe me, no sarcasm there at all. But yeah, we got 5 more matches, 5 Crow Sting matches. I tried to break these up between like WCW and TNA and AEW. It's kind of funny, the height of Crow Sting, he's not wrestling. So there's not, it's that whole year he's in the rafters.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start the fall of 98, September 14th to be exact. It's a Monday Nitro from Greenville, South Carolina. It's Sting challenging Goldberg for the world title. Sting and Goldberg are 2 of my favorites at the time. This is 3-year-old Dylan just loving Sting and Goldberg. They're both good guys going head to head. The crowd is hot, as all those Nitro crowds were in 98. It's probably one of Goldberg's best matches up to that point. And it's competitive. It's not a squash. Sting has him in the deathlock at the end until Hogan comes out and interferes. These aren't the 5 best Sting matches, just 5 I pulled. So I got to throw Goldberg on there. Match number 2, we're going to stay on Nitro. April 26, 1999. It's Sting actually winning the world title from DDP. A bright spot when Nitro doesn't have too many bright spots. They're on the downhill slope at this point. Quick story. First time I watched this was on a Best of Nitro DVD years after it happened. I knew DDP won the title at Spring Stampede. I knew he lost the title at Slamboree to Kevin Nash. I thought surely he holds it the whole months in between. And to my surprise, Sting wins this match and wins the title. And in typical 99 fashion, he loses the title that same night in the main event back to DDP. 2 title changes one night. Gotta love it. But the match itself is phenomenal. Absolutely love it. I'm going to jump to TNA for numbers 3 and 4. I'll start Bound for Glory 2008. It's Sting and Samoa Joe. Sting beats Joe for the title. Main event of Bound for Glory. Technically, it's Sting's first TNA world title. His second. He won in 07. They switched it from NWA to TNA. This is like right at the start, just weeks before the main event Mafia is actually formed. So the crowd is split because on one hand, people love Sting because he's been around, 30 years at this point.
Sure.
But he technically is the bad guy. And so you got some people booing Joe because they love Sting and some people cheering Joe. It's a mess, but the match is really fun. Joe does like a drop kick out of a like luxury box onto the steps that had to hurt. It's just gnarly. I'm going to move 1 year forward in time for match number 4, Bound for Glory 2009. It's Sting versus AJ Styles this time in the main event. AJ retains. maybe a passing of the torch that might be too strong considering where they both were by 2009. But it's a great main event. Sting had won the title at the previous 3 Bound for Glories. He beat Jarrett and then Angle and then Joe. So there was a lot of speculation. Is Sting going to go 4-0 at Bound for Glory and win the title every year? Or is AJ going to win? And the funny part in hindsight is they really teased this might be Sting's last match. Again, that's October of 2009. He's doing this. I might retire. They give him the mic after he cuts a long promo. Oh, I don't know if I'll be back or not, but you guys make me want to come back. And that wouldn't quite be his last match. But to jump to my number 5, we will go to his last match. AEW Revolution 2025, March 3rd. It's the tag title match. Sting and Darby Allin retaining against the Young Bucks. Just a perfect ending for Sting. There's a great video package where he's like in a theater watching some highlights of his career before the match. His sons come out with him in his entrance, one in Wolfpack Sting attire, one in that like Great American Bash 1990, the red, white, and blue. They give him the Metallica entrance.
Yep.
AEW Sting was wild. Okay, we got to remember this match. There has glass. They have tables. He's going off a ladder. It's like Sting went to ECW for a minute and came back as AEW Sting. It's in Greensboro. You got Shivani and JR and Excalibur on the call. Shivani and JR are on the call for so many of his matches. You got Flair involved, Steamboat's involved. You got legends in the crowd. It's just an excellent send-off. I watched it again in preparation for this and kind of got emotional all over again watching it, even though we're well after the fact at this point. Just a great way to wrap up a legendary career. And, if I had to pick a favorite, I gave you 5 on episode 1, Surfer Sting. I gave you 5 tonight. I probably do got to go back to Greensboro, that first Clash of the Champions, Sting and Ric Flair, the time limit draw, the match that made Sting.
Made him, yeah.
It's hard to say like his first big match was my favorite because normally, you have your breakout and then you'll have more huge matches. And by all means, he had more huge matches. Yeah. But there was just something about him and Flair on that night going that time limit draw. I still love it. That might be my favorite.
Yeah, it was definitely his coming out party that night, and we all woke up loving him the next day, you know what I mean? So before we start to close it out here, I do want to talk about his TNA run. And, his TNA run was kind of like in the middle of everything. We think WCW beginning at the end, AEW, you know what I mean? And I'll be honest, his TNA run, when I want to watch matches of Sting working, you know what I mean? Like in a Crow Sting, I go and watch TNA matches. That's where he put most of his work in. WCW, yes, he did work, but that was a lot of character work there, And then at the end, AEW, everything put together. But when I want to go watch great Sting matches, you know what I mean? Like I watch the TNA era, you know what I mean? Because I feel like he was motivated, you know what I mean? Because, he wasn't in the 2 big companies or whatever, maybe WCW is gone. I don't remember the timeline, but, yeah, like that was when he kind of like was really sinking his teeth to and working, and there was a lot of good guys, for him to work with. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are new to DB's Territory Treasures, first of all, thank you guys so much for downloading today. I really do appreciate it. But I always talk about my connection to the subject at hand. And man, let me tell you something. I really loved the Crow movie, right? There's this part in the movie that if you've ever seen it, it's they're just going crazy. They're going, the gang's going around crazy and they're shooting it up. They're going, fire it up, fire it up. So every time I hear somebody say fire it up, I think of that movie. And if you've ever seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But my connection is this, man. So I just told you that I love the Crow movie. And, if you've ever listened to me talk at all, and you can just even listen to my accent and know that I was a WCW guy, right? Growing up, in North Carolina, but man, I love the 90s, and I'm a big 90s fan. It was, kind of Sting's era, I love the 90s the most, because I feel like I learned a lot about wrestling in the 90s. I learned a lot about life in the 90s and everything in between, you know what I'm saying? So Sting as Crow Sting, to me, was one of the last icons, one of the last depictions of the 1990s wrestling that was still around. You know what I mean? And so like when I saw Sting, like it always connected me back to the 90s. You know what I mean? You know, I graduated high school in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? I had a lot of fun in the 90s. You know what I mean? So, you know, Sting was, when I saw that face paint, it was always that nostalgic to me. You know, it always connected me, you know, back to the 90s. The movie came out in 1994. You know, we got Crow Sting, I think, Dylan, correct me if I'm right, 1996 to 2024. Does that sound about right, roughly? You know?
Yeah, 24, 25. Yeah.
But
yeah, something like that.
What an icon. What a great extension from the 90s era. Crow Sting forever, man. Like always and forever. You know, there's literally not an iteration of Sting that I don't like. You know what I mean? But you know, and Surfer will always be my favorite because, you know, little boy me running around the living room, you know, wrestling with pillows and, you know, body slamming and backdropping, you know, people, you know, Sting, the blonde hair and the tights was on the TV. You know what I'm saying? So I'll always be a big Surfer Sting fan. But man, Crow Sting really set into me as an adult, you know what I mean? And, you know, the storyline, you know, and every time I see that face, man, you know, in the face paint, it's just, you know, it's nostalgic. It's an era of wrestling that I miss. It's an era of wrestling that I yearn for. Yes, you know, it's cheesy. Yes, it was great. Yes, some was bad, but that's wrestling, man. You know what I mean? It just is, you know, so I want to thank everybody for downloading, listening, and subscribing. Head on over to sitdownmarks.com. Head over there and subscribe if you don't mind. Dylan, I want to thank you, brother, for doing this 2-part series with me. This is kind of something that we, you know, kind of tried. We got a lot of good feedback for it. Hopefully everybody likes this episode too. And we can bring you back and do it again, man, for somebody else, you know, in the future, man. But before you get out of here, Dylan, man, you got a really awesome indie wrestling preview that you put out each and every week, man. Tell everybody where they can go find that.
Yeah, every week, like you said, indie wrestling preview. That's at best way to find is my Twitter at DHagerJ15, DHAGERJ15. Been trying to put it out on Wednesday nights, give it a little more shelf life, but Wednesday night, maybe Thursday evening, around that time. It'll be pinned to the top of my page. Again, DB, thank you for having me on. You know, we've talked about Sting as my favorite wrestler. And, you know, I love the territories, love the old school. I might be more of a new school age, but I love that old school. Anytime you want to have me back, you know where to find me.
Of course, man. Of course. I want to thank you again, brother. I really do appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for, like I said, downloading and subscribing. I am DB, the Dirty Bird. For myself and Dylan, I want to thank you guys so much. Keep spreading the good word of wrestling, and we'll see you next time as we dive into another Territory Treasure.